The miracle wasn't in thunder or lightning, nor in fire or spectacle. It began quietly, in the unspoken language between two beings who had both known pain. A miracle is when a cage does not kill the spirit. A miracle is when eyes that once held nothing but mistrust begin to soften. And a miracle is when a human, weary from her own questions, sits silently near a wounded soul. And instead of fear, she finds trust reaching back through steel and shadow. That night, when Jaime first saw Koba step toward her, not with anger, not with brokenness, but with presence, the miracle had already begun. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. A cry that begins not with roars or sirens, but with silence. A silence so heavy, it makes the heart race before a single word is spoken. On that quiet afternoon in Asheville, North Carolina, a city cradled by the arms of the Blue Ridge Mountains, destiny prepared to unveil a secret that would stir the world. The mountains, dressed in mist, seemed to lean closer as if they too wanted to witness what was about to unfold. A wildlife sanctuary on the town's edge, a place meant for healing and second chances, became the stage, and at the center of it all stood Koba, a towering silverback gorilla whose body carried scars of cruelty, but whose eyes carried something far greater. The unspoken depth of creation's wisdom. Most saw him as fear, a wild beast in a cage, but those who lingered long enough, who dared to look into his gaze, knew there was more. A tenderness that whispered of old forests, forgotten songs, and a bond between animal and humanity we too often choose to forget. Into this world stepped Jaime, a young woman with gentle eyes and unsure hands, whose heart carried a quiet longing for meaning. Their meeting was not chance, but calling. The wilderness and the wasteland shall be glad for them, and the desert shall rejoice and blossom as the rose. And just like that, in the middle of storm clouds and silence, the stage was set for a bond that would shatter the walls of fear and leave a trail of hope that the world could not ignore. Jaime had not been born for this world. Not at first glance. She was no ranger raised in forests, no child of rivers and stones. She was a city girl, molded by red traffic lights, skyscrapers, and the endless hum of sirens in Charlotte. Her childhood was crowded with noise, but empty of silence. And silence is where the soul learns to hear. After college, carrying the weight of exhaustion and uncertainty, she packed a single suitcase and headed west to Asheville. She thought she was running away, but really, she was running towards something her spirit already knew. The Blue Ridge Wildlife Sanctuary was not glamorous. No shining lights, no applause. It was sweat, dirt, aching muscles, and early mornings where her alarm clock was the low call of animals waking to greet another day. At first, she only scrubbed cages, carried buckets, and shoveled things no one dreams of touching. Yet, within those unglamorous mornings, Jaime found something she didn't know she'd lost. Herself. In the gaze of wild creatures, silent yet profound, she discovered healing. Ask the animals and they will teach you, or the birds in the sky, and they will tell you. Each scrape of a brush, each bucket poured, became prayer. And then came Koba. The first time Jaime saw him, the world seemed to pause. The morning sun draped him in gold, his silver back glowing like armor forged by heaven itself. He stood nearly 6 feet tall, weighing well over 400 pounds, chest broad as stone, shoulders unyielding. But it was not his strength that stopped her breath. It was his eyes, deep, brown, and unbroken. They held the story of generations before cages, before cruelty. Behind them lived pain. Yes, but also a question. A question only the brave could answer. Would you see me as more than a beast? Most staff stayed distant, cautious, bound by rules and haunted by his past. Koba had been rescued from an illegal exotic trade, years stolen inside a rusted cage. No one knew the full horrors he endured, but they left behind wounds visible and invisible. Keepers never entered alone. They carried poles, walked in pairs, always ready for unpredictability. But Jaime, she didn't try to touch him. She didn't try to prove herself. She simply sat. During breaks she read aloud softly, her voice trembling but steady, words floating into the air like lullabies the forest had long forgotten. Sometimes she hummed, Sometimes she just existed near him. Days turned into weeks. And one morning, he moved closer, 10 feet away, back straight, head tilted, eyes locked on hers. Her pulse quickened. Fear clawed at her chest. But she stayed still. And then, Koba rumbled. Low. Gentle. A sound no one expected. Not warning, not threat. A sound closer to trust. And from that moment, something invisible bound them together. Perfect love drives out fear. As weeks turned to months, their connection deepened in ways staff could not explain. Koba began appearing wherever Jaime was. If she worked, he watched. If she paused, he waited. If she sang under her breath, he listened. And then came the day when his massive fingers reached through the bars. Not in violence, but in curiosity. A single brush against her shoe. The headkeeper panicked. She's too close. Reassign her now. But Jaime begged for another chance. Not to break rules, not to cross lines, but simply to remain present. That was her gift. Presence. And in return, Koba chose her again and again. Whispers spread among the staff. Some called it foolish. Others called it fate. But no one could deny it. The sanctuary had witnessed many rescues, many recoveries. But never this. It was as if Koba himself had chosen Jaime as his voice, his bridge to the world. And yet, destiny always tests the bonds it creates. The test came with the storm. That morning, the air was strange, thick, heavy, like heaven itself held its breath. Clouds rolled in like an army of shadows. Lightning stretched its fingers across the sky. Radios crackled with warnings of flash floods. Volunteers were sent home, but Jaime stayed. She couldn't leave. Not with Koba pacing, restless, his eyes darting skyward with each thunderclap. The other gorillas retreated indoors, but not him. He lingered near the front, close to where Jaime moved quickly, latching gates, securing supplies. Perhaps she knew something was coming. Perhaps Koba did too. Then the sky split open. A bolt of lightning struck a towering oak with a sound that shook the ground, splintering it into pieces that rained fire and wood. Panic erupted. Alarms blared. A massive branch came crashing down, tearing open the outer fence of Koba's enclosure. And in that chaos, Jaime fell. She had gone back for a bag of food, only to be struck down by a limb that hurled her into the mud. Her arm twisted. Pain seared through her. Her body pinned. Rain poured in torrents, drowning out cries. Staff ran, searching, but visibility was gone. Yet Koba already knew. He had seen her fall. Without hesitation, without fear, the Silverback charged. One leap, then another, his massive body crossing his enclosure in seconds. At the shattered fence, he paused only long enough to understand. Then, with one hand, he tore through the gap and stepped into the storm. A keeper screamed. Koba's out! Panic surged. Chaos screamed louder. But for Jaime, trapped in the mud, the story was only beginning. This is the storm-washed cry of the wild. A reminder that sometimes the fiercest creatures hold the gentlest hearts. And sometimes the smallest gestures rewrite the bond between humans and animals forever. That day in Asheville, under skies ripped open by thunder, humanity came face to face with its own reflection. Not in glass, but in the unwavering eyes of a silverback gorilla who chose not rage, but protection. Staff scrambled, tranquilizers shaking in their hands. Fear thick as the rain itself. One keeper, trembling, raised a dart rifle toward the beast. But before metal could pierce flesh, something greater silenced the chaos. Jaime, broken in the mud, lifted her head enough to see a sight that froze time itself. Koba was not rampaging. He was not running. He was standing over her. His chest heaved against the downpour. His muscles coiled like armor. His eyes sharp, scanning every shadow as though guarding a fallen comrade. He made no attack, no sound of fury, only presence. When a keeper edged too near, Koba's low growl rolled through the storm. Not aggression, not violence, a warning. Don't harm her. And then, with a grace no one could comprehend, he bent low, lowering his massive frame until his body became a shield between Jaime and the world. His hand, wide, scarred, mighty, reached the mud inches from her side. Not touching, simply there, as if to say, you are not alone. Greater love has no one than this. to lay down one's life for one's friends. Seconds felt like lifetimes. Rain washed their fear into silence, and then Jaime's trembling whisper pierced it all. "Koba, it's okay. I'm okay." His eyes met hers, not wild, but knowing, and slowly, carefully, Koba backed away. He turned toward the broken fence and, like a soldier releasing his post, waited. When the vet team rushed in, he didn't resist. He didn't fight. He stepped calmly back into his enclosure. No one spoke. Some dropped their tranquilizers, some wept openly, and the keeper who had raised his rifle lowered it, his hands shaking, his mouth unable to form words. In that thunder-soaked stillness, something unbreakable had formed. Not between human and gorilla, but between two souls who refused to be defined by fear. By morning, the world knew. Local headlines lit up. Gorilla protects volunteer during storm. By nightfall, regional news carried it. Within days, national anchors stared into cameras asking the same question. Why would a wild gorilla protect a human? Theories spun. Instinct, training, coincidence. But Jaime knew, deep in her healing wrist, in the bruises still aching, she knew this wasn't instinct. This wasn't chance. This was connection. The wolf will live with the lamb, and a little child will lead them. Isaiah 11:6, and in this case, a broken gorilla and a gentle woman proved the verse true. Jaime's injuries were mercifully minor. A fractured wrist, a few bruises, but her heart carried something greater, something eternal, and she couldn't stay away. Days later, she returned. As she walked down the path toward Koba's enclosure, silence fell among the staff. Cameras rolled, eyes watched, but Koba didn't pace. He didn't retreat. He stood tall, walked forward, and pressed his great forehead against the mesh. Jaime knelt, tears streaming, and pressed hers to the same spot. A communion not of hands, but of souls, and the sanctuary held its breath. From that day on, Koba was different. No more unpredictable pacing, no more growls at keepers. He began to participate in enrichment games he had long refused. He carried himself not as a prisoner, but as one who had been seen. Staff whispered behind closed doors, calling Jaime the Gorilla Whisperer. Reporters lined the gates. Behaviorists scribbled notes, trying to measure what could not be measured. Because the truth was beyond data, it was this. Sometimes two souls, wounded by life, simply find each other. And when they do, healing spills out into everyone who witnesses it. One afternoon, months after the storm, a bus of schoolchildren arrived. They laughed, pointed, restless with curiosity. Jaime guided them to the gorilla habitat, explaining intelligence, habits, survival. A little girl tugged her sleeve. "Miss Hime," she asked softly, "how do you make the gorillas like you?" Jaime smiled and looked at Koba lounging under a tree. "You don't make them do anything," she whispered. "You just show them you're not afraid, and then you keep showing up." The girl frowned, not fully understanding, but Koba did, with a low, familiar rumble. The same sound he'd made the first time Jaime read to him. He rose. Slowly, he stretched his massive arm toward the fence, tapping the ground near it. An invitation. Jaime stepped closer, and for the first time in front of a crowd, she rested her hand on the mesh where his rested. A hush swept over the children. Teachers pressed tissues to their faces. No one saw a beast anymore. They saw a guardian, a friend, a being once broken, now choosing over and over again to trust. For with God, nothing shall be impossible. The sanctuary's miracle became a beacon. Families traveled from across the country, not just to see gorillas, but to witness this bond. Elderly couples cried, children stood wide-eyed, even hardened staff softened. Their hearts cracked open by what they could not explain. But miracles often invite questions. Behind closed doors, some worried. Was it safe to let a wild gorilla form such a close bond with a single person? What if it broke? What if it turned? Liability hung heavy in the air. One evening, Jaime overheard board members whispering, and for the first time, doubt crept into her chest. Was she protecting Koba or risking him? Her heart ached at the thought, but destiny had more truth to reveal. One morning, a stranger arrived, briefcase in hand, smile uneasy, carrying a folder thick with old records. He claimed he had been there when Koba was first rescued. Inside were photographs. Koba younger, thinner, eyes hollow, fur matted, a cage of metal bars and concrete. No trees, no sky, and worse, videos, prodded with poles, hosed down with freezing water, blasted with deafening noise until he cowered. Jaime fled the room, tears burning, shaking. She had wondered about the scars, the pacing. Now she knew, but Koba had never told her. He couldn't. Instead, he chose to show her the only truth he still believed. Trust. And that was the miracle. That was the story the world came to hear. A gorilla, tortured by men, had every reason to hate them. Yet, when the storm broke, he chose not to destroy, but to protect. He chose not to remember cruelty, but to risk himself for love. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails. Jaime and Koba's bond became the sanctuary's living gospel, a viral YouTube story that turned hearts across the globe. But it was more than headlines, more than hashtags. It was a reminder that inside the wild beats a love we have yet to fully understand. And if a broken gorilla can forgive, protect, and trust again, then perhaps, just perhaps, so can we. The shadows had a way of holding secrets, and in those shadows his eyes glowed. Watchful, mistrustful, carrying stories that words could never tell. Every movement he made when Jaime first arrived at Blue Ridge Wildlife Sanctuary was careful, almost painfully deliberate, as though the air itself might punish him if he misstepped. Koba, the silverback, had not just been caged. He had been broken by cruelty, shaped by hands that didn't know compassion. And yet, there was a quiet storm in him, a reminder that survival itself was a miracle. That evening, long after the sanctuary gates had closed and laughter of visitors faded into silence, Jaime returned to his enclosure. She didn't speak. She just sat on the cold earth, her heart heavy, her mind restless, her soul processing questions that had no easy answers. The world was quiet until Koba emerged from the deeper corner of his pen. He did not run. He did not play. He did not even flare with excitement. He walked slowly, as if carrying centuries of memory in his steps. And then he stopped, kneeling by the fence, his dark eyes locked onto hers, not searching for comfort, not demanding anything, just present, just there. Jaime's voice cracked under the weight of the silence. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her words trembling. Koba tilted his massive head, listening, steady as stone yet tender in presence. "I saw what they did to you," she said, tears finding their way down her cheeks. She didn't expect him to understand the language of sorrow, but he didn't look away. "I wish I could change it. I wish I had been there sooner." Her voice broke, fragile as a wing in the storm. And then, Koba did something that eternity itself would remember. Slowly, with a gravity that stilled the night, he reached out, his massive knuckles pressed gently against the fence, aligned perfectly where her trembling hand rested. Not to touch, not to demand, simply to say, "It's okay. You're here now." Jaime's tears came freely. For the first time, she cried before him, and he did not flinch, did not retreat. He stayed, silent, steady, grounded. In that moment, she realized something soul deep. Koba was not broken. He was a survivor. He had endured pain, fear, and cruelty. And still he chose trust. He chose to love, not because he forgot the past, but because in Jaime's presence, he was seen not as a beast, but as a soul worth healing. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and a rhythm was born between them. Every morning Jaime greeted him. Every evening she lingered at his side, even after her shift had ended. The fences were still there physically, but in their eyes, the walls had already dissolved. Trust replaced fear. Silence became a language. And together, they built a bond that needed no words. It was in those moments that Jaime understood. Sometimes survival isn't just about living. It's about finding someone who stays. But time has a way of testing bonds. And one morning, a letter arrived. A national primate research institute, known for its expansive reserves and natural sanctuaries, had heard of Koba's transformation. They extended an offer to relocate him to Colorado, to a vast protected land where he could roam with a troop, surrounded by forests and mountains. For the board, it was a triumph. Headlines, funding, prestige. For Jaime, it was heartbreak. Her chest tightened, her breath stolen at the thought of him leaving. Of course, it was the right thing. Koba deserved sky instead of fences, friends instead of solitude, freedom instead of captivity. But how does one let go of a soul that had redefined survival itself? She asked for just one thing, to be the one who told him. On his final morning at Blue Ridge, Jaime walked to his enclosure with her small green pouch, the one always filled with his favorite dried fruit. Koba emerged slowly, already sensing that something in the air had shifted. She knelt, forcing a smile through the cracks of sorrow. "I think you're going somewhere better," she whispered. "So a place with more sky, more friends." Koba tilted his head, his eyes searching hers. Jaime's voice faltered. "I don't know if you'll remember me. Maybe you'll forget. But if you do, that's okay. I just hope you feel safe there." Her hands trembled as she pulled out a single strip of dried mango, his favorite, and slid it beneath the fence. But he didn't take it. Not right away. Instead, he stepped closer and for the first time placed both of his massive hands firmly against the mesh. A deliberate, grounding gesture. Jaime mirrored him, pressing her palms to the cold steel, skin to barrier, heart to heart. Time stood still. For that moment, there were no fences, only connection. Two are better than one. If either of them falls, one can help the other up. Minutes later, the transport team arrived. No tranquilizers, no sedatives. Koba walked into the reinforced crate on his own, calm as dawn. Not because he was taken, but because he understood. As the truck rolled down the dirt road, Jaime stood at the sanctuary's edge. She didn't cry. Not yet. She simply watched. Koba's silhouette, towering and steady, remained visible until the road bent, and the forest swallowed the view. Silence fell heavy on the sanctuary. Volunteers returned to their duties. Guests asked casually where the great Silverback had gone, and keepers answered with polite smiles. But Jaime, she sat alone under Koba's favorite tree. For the first time, she noticed how the leaves shifted differently in the wind, as if they remembered him, as if they carried a piece of his spirit with them. Days became weeks, weeks became months, seasons changed. And then, one crisp autumn morning, a package arrived with no letter, no sender. Inside lay a single photograph. It was Koba, standing tall on a grassy hill in Colorado, surrounded by 3 other gorillas. His shoulders relaxed, his face calm, his spirit at peace. And in his hand was a single mango. On the back, written in a hand Jaime did not recognize, were 4 simple words. He still remembers her. Jaime's tears returned, but this time they carried warmth instead of ache. She smiled through them, her heart lighter. This wasn't goodbye. Not really. Because when 2 souls find each other through pain, through silence, through storms, they never truly part. Somewhere, beneath a wider sky, a once wounded gorilla stood tall, healed by the simple truth that someone once sat quietly near him and never left. Love never fails. This is more than an animal rescue story. It is a reminder of survival, of bonds deeper than language, of the quiet miracles that happen when humanity chooses compassion. A touching animal story, a heartwarming animal video, a viral YouTube story waiting to remind the world. Animals are not just survivors, they are teachers. And sometimes, healing is as simple as sitting in silence and choosing never to leave. The sun was sinking low behind the trees when Jaime held the photograph in her trembling hands. Koba stood tall in it, his broad chest glowing with strength, his eyes calm in a way she had prayed he would one day find. In his hand was a single mango, the same fruit she had always offered him, the same bond they had shared in silence. And on the back, in uneven writing, were 4 simple words. He still remembers her. Tears welled in Jaime's eyes. But this time, they weren't born from sorrow. They were born from peace. Because love like this doesn't end at fences, or cages, or even distance. It carves itself into the soul and remains, no matter how far the road stretches. She pressed the photo to her chest, whispering into the wind, "You're free now, Koba, and you're never alone." Somewhere beneath the Colorado sky, a once broken gorilla lifted his face to the horizon, holding his mango gently, as if he too was whispering back,